Welcome to the Addison Historical Museum. The museum was formed in 1976 by the Addison Historical Society and the Addison Historical Commission. Let's learn a bit about Addison history. The first settlers in this area were the Native Americans. The Potawatomi tribe was the tribe that was here in Addison. They lived in typical homes, such as the longhouse, and they were hunter and gatherers. They would follow their game and hunt, and they would collect seeds and berries. In the summertime, the women would do a bit of farming. Not much remains from these early Native Americans because they were removed west of the Mississippi River in the 1830s because of the Black Hawk War. What does remain are some of the old Indian trails that are still found in the Chicago area. They later became the basis for many of our roads. Addison was first settled by people from outside this area in the 1830s. These people came from the Northeast, and many came from Germany. Back at that time, things were not good in Germany. People left to escape political persecution, for greater religious freedom, and for better economics. When they got here, they met other Germans, and the Germans instituted Lutheran institutions. One of these early institutions was the Evangelical Lutheran Seminary, which was built in 1864. The purpose of the seminary was to train males to be school teachers. It was here in Addison where the village hall now stands until 1913. They later relocated to River Forest and are now Concordia Teachers College. This is a model of a one-room schoolhouse. One teacher would teach children ages K through 8. Notice the outbuilding in the back featured an outhouse for girls and a separate outhouse for boys. In 1906, the St. Paul Evangelical Lutheran Church was built on West Army Trail Boulevard. Prior to that, Addison residents had to go to Zion Lutheran Evangelical Church in Bensonville. The church still remains a vibrant congregation today. In the 1870s, the Lutherans established the Orphan Asylum to take care of Lutheran children who had lost one or both of their parents. Every year, a festival was held in Addison to support the operations of the orphanage. Many people from throughout the Midwest would travel here to Addison to support the orphanage. In the teens, another organization called the Kinderheim, which translates to Children's Home, was established in Addison. They took over the former seminary buildings. In 1925, they tore down those buildings and built a new brick structure. That structure served until the 1960s, when it was sold to the village to serve as Village Hall. Meanwhile, at the orphanage property on Lake Street, the orphanage was replaced because it was no longer needed, and the Luther Brook School was built in 1960. Luther Brook served as a school for children with emotional problems until 2017. Currently, the property is owned by the Village of Addison. Many of Addison's early residents were farmers. In addition to growing crops such as corn, wheat, and barley, they also raised dairy cows and shipped their milk to Chicago. In addition to these type of farmers, Addison also had a large number of nurseries where plants and trees were grown. This is the Heidemann windmill. The Heidemann windmill was built in the 1860s by Christian Heidemann, a German farmer. Inside was the grist mill that would grind the grain into flour. It used the power of the wind to turn the turnstones. The windmill was in operation until the 1920s when it fell into disrepair. In the 1950s, the windmill burned down under suspicious circumstances. All that remains today of the windmill is Mill Road in Addison and a historical marker at the corner of Sharon and Ronald Drives. Addison was incorporated as a village in 1884. The first village hall was in a storefront on Lake Street. In 1898, the first building built as a village hall was erected on Lake Street. It was built by Ernst Heidemann for a sum of $760. Following that, Village Hall was moved into a house on Lake Street. It was not until 1960 that Village Hall came to its current location. It bought the former Kinderheim building and served as Village Hall from 1960 to 1999. In 1999, that building was replaced by the current Village Hall in Addison. Louis' Restaurant was a tradition in Addison. It was first opened in 1918. Its location at Lake Street and Villa was always prone to flooding and ultimately led to its demise after the 1987 flood. This painting used to hang in Louis' Restaurant. It depicts some of the local landmarks at that time in Addison. In the lower left corner is St. Paul Evangelical Lutheran Church, which still remains here in Addison. To the right of that is the first Addison Railroad Depot. That building served from 1890 to 1946. Then it was moved to Maple and became a home. The other buildings depicted on this painting are no longer here in Addison. They include the first building built as a village hall in 1898, the original water tower from Addison, the first village gazebo from the late 1960s, the Addison State Bank from 1902, the Heidemann Mill from 1867, and the Lisa Burke Farmhouse from the 1800s. That is where Green Meadow Shopping Center is now located. You may be wondering about the building you're in right now. This is the William Balzer House. This house used to be on Lake Street. Mr. Balzer married Maria Heidemann, the daughter of Christian Heidemann, who owned and operated the windmill. He had this house built for his daughter and her new husband. Mr. Balzer was a tombstone carver by trade. The Balzer family lived in the house until it was sold to the village of Addison. The building was moved here along with the coach house in 1999 to serve as the Addison Historical Museum. Late in its life, the building became a two-flat. One of the apartments was rented out for a brief period of time by Roland Harper, a member of the Chicago Bears professional football team. I call this our musical instrument and technology room. Back in the 1890s, when this house was built, there was no electricity in Addison. In their spare time, families would encourage children to learn to play a musical instrument. In the 1920s, the phonograph became available. Please note the hand crank on the side of the phonograph. That's how you powered the turntable. In the 1940s, radio came into being, and you could listen to your favorite weekly program, The Adventures of Superman, on a weekly basis. In the case are featured old desk accessories, old phones and office equipments and clocks. Also note the collection of old-fashioned skeleton keys. Many homes would feature a piano or a parlor organ such as this one. At some point, this little side porch was added to the home. This enabled the residents of the upstairs flat to access their apartment. It is used today for changing exhibits. The historic downtown of Addison was Lake Street and Addison Road. On the northeast corner of that intersection were these two buildings. On your left, the Marquardt General Store, and on the right, the Hoor Meat Market, and later became the Zimmerman Vegetable Market. This picture dates to around 1900. The items in this case are items that were or are being produced in Addison. Addison is currently the largest industrial district in DuPage County and the fourth largest in the state of Illinois. Addison businesses have always promoted their business. Back in the day, items such as calendars, yardsticks, matches, ashtrays were very common. Today, you can get coffee mugs, water bottles, wine cozies, and such. This board game is based on Monopoly. It was used as a fundraiser for a camp that was never built. Note some of the Addison businesses along the playing board. Lake Street is also US Route 20. US Route 20 is the longest US federal highway in the country. It starts outside of Boston, Massachusetts, and goes all the way across the country and terminates near Newport, Oregon. Of course, Lake Street, or Route 20, goes directly through Addison. Back in the day, it was home to both residences and businesses. Today, Lake Street is mostly lined with businesses. Around 1930, the village of Addison's population was 916 people. This included local farmers and residents of the local orphanage home. It was not until the 1960s when Addison experienced the population explosion. Starting in the mid-1950s, developers started buying up land and building affordable houses, and people from the city purchased these houses and began moving out to Addison. Between 1960 and 1970, the population of Addison quadrupled from over 6,700 residents in 1960 to over 24,000 residents by 1970. Here we have the museum's collection of antique toys. Many of the toys will seem familiar to you, except they are done in different materials. Plastic had not been invented back in the day, so items were made out of glass, metal, wood, porcelain, rubber, or something called composition, which was like paper mache. Did you know that Addison had its own amusement park? Adventureland was an amusement park on the border of Addison and Bloomingdale Township that operated from 1961 to 1977. It originally began as Paul's Picnic Grove and later as Storybook Gardens and catered to young families with their small young children. Later on, faster rides were added to attract teenagers to come to Adventureland. Unfortunately, Adventureland was put out of business when Great America came to Illinois. Both the Addison Fire Protection District and the Addison Police Department have come a long way since their humble beginnings. The Addison Fire Department was an all-volunteer department for many years. They purchased their first engine in 1930. The Addison Police Department had one officer in the 1920s and 30s. Today, both serve and protect the village of Addison. Addison has had a long tradition of volunteer organizations serving the community. Some are still active in Addison, and some unfortunately have folded. The Rotary Club of Addison and the Lions Club of Addison are no longer in operation. But Addison is still served by the Addison Kiwanis Club, the Knights of Columbus, and the Medina Shrine. Addison residents have served their country in a variety of conflicts. Even though Addison was not incorporated as a village until 1884, Addison Township residents served in the Civil War. The 105th Illinois Infantry had many members from the township. During World War I, we were able through research to find 4 gentlemen who served in the armed services who came from Addison. Their stories are featured here at the museum. Addison residents were again called to serve their country during World War II. Many residents were of German descent, and that proved problematic for several gentlemen who became POWs during the war. The Germans thought they must be spies if they could speak the German language. Unfortunately, the museum collection does not have much information on Korean War veterans from the Addison area. If you know someone who has served during this time, please contact the museum. The 4 gentlemen featured in this display gave their lives during the Vietnam War conflict. All of them passed away before their 22nd birthdays. These pictures and hat were recently donated to the museum by a veteran of the Persian Gulf War. This gentleman served in Kuwait. In the late 1950s, early 1960s, the United States was in the midst of a Cold War with the Soviet Union. Did you know that Addison had a Nike missile base located here? There were 2 components to the base. One, where the missile silos were located, south of Fullerton, near Jeffrey Drive, now is the location of the Addison Consolidated Dispatch Center. The other facility featured radar towers, and that was located just east of Route 53. That is Nike Park, which is now operated by the Addison Park District. Fortunately for the residents of Addison, the base never had to fire any of its missiles at incoming Soviet aircraft, and a crisis was averted. This exhibit features the Addison VFW. The VFW recently celebrated its 75th anniversary here in Addison. It was formed following World War II to help servicemen on their return from conflict. The Addison VFW was well known for its drilling team, the Addison Gents. The trophies in this case represent some of the national titles they won for their precision drilling.